Hi, I'm Bob. On behalf of Radar Busters, I'm pleased to bring you another video in this series on the featuring the Cobra DP360. That's my shortened version of it. The formal name is the Cobra Dual Pro 360. I think the DP360 is easier. But I'm going to take you through how to configure this detector in two ways. Just one is through the buttons as it's running and not in its programming mode or configuration mode formally. And then once we go through that, and I'll show you how to use that or how to configure it, then we'll get into the programming features of the detector, and as we did with the Road Scout, and show you how to do that both from the detectors on the detector itself as well as with the Cobra iRadar app that is connected via Bluetooth. So, and I have an iPhone, so it'll be similar on the Android phones, but I use the Apple phone, so you'll see how it works there. And then we'll go over some of the recommended configurations based on where you drive. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is power up the detector, because that's something you need, is the power. We're going to take the cigarette adapter, the smart cord, plug it into the cigarette lighter, and we're going to then put the RJ11 jack in, which the little nipple here goes into the bottom of the detector. Okay, now this detector is going to power up. You can see the name. And there we go, we're ready to go. So here we go. It's in its default settings, which is an overspeed alert, you can see, for 70. What that is when you're driving, since it's got GPS and it's going to know your speed real time, if you go over that, it'll let you know if you're not really paying attention. Now, generally, I don't use 70. Most of the speed limits on the highway where I'm going to be using this detector for the most part are 65. Some places are 70, others are 75. And generally what I do is put it around 15 over. Or if you wanted to get a little tighter, 10 over. I've basically found that police generally don't write for 10 over, but you could set your overspeed if you know that they're tough in your area or a little bit more lax, depending on where you are, about 10 over, which is nice because what happens is if you're not really paying attention, this will alert you that you just keep in mind where your speed is. So pretty cool feature and something you can change. You'll also see now on the front that it reads auto. This is the default mode, and really what I would recommend that you do for the most part. There'll be some reasons why you would want to change it, but for the most part, if you're doing a combination of city driving or highway driving, that's, the detector will automatically change its sensitivity, and it only affects X and K based if you have X on, for example. So it would only really be K then if you have X off, and you don't need X in most locations, and we're going to talk about that a little bit further. It'll reduce the sensitivity as your speed goes down, and if you come to a stoplight and you just happen to be by a Walmart or a CVS or Walgreens where there's a K-band door, you'll often see that it'll mute that, so you won't be punished where you never would get a speed. So the auto sensitivity is nice, and to be very clear, once you're driving at highway speeds, the auto level goes to the highway setting, which basically means the maximum performance. So there really isn't any need to change it from its default settings other than auto, with the exception of X-band, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So there you go. But on the front of the detector, you'll see the buttons, and given that this is, really an Escort product with a Cobra name, and that's a very good thing, by the way, the configuration and the programming is going to be really basically identical to what Escort users would know. So even if you don't know, this is a new product for you, which is a great start. I'll take you through what some of these values are and what they mean. So here is the power button. If you power it off,
powering down,
you see there goes the detector. It's going to shut itself off. Power it back up. Nice thing about this, it'll remember the state when you power it off. So if I power it off,
powering down,
I think this should stay off when I plug it back in. Let's see. So I'm going to take the plug out. I'm going to plug it in. Okay, get the nice click. And you can see it remembers that it wasn't powered on. I'm going to turn it on, the button up here. See, it comes on, and if I unplug it again and then plug it back in, get that nice solid connection, it comes back on. So that's really nice that it remembers the state. Most high-end detectors do that, but it's nice to see that it's in this detector as well. So we did the power on, power off button. This button here is the sensitivity. And this is where, if you're really going to be around town for an extended period of time, you could actually turn this. Again, the auto mode does most of the work for you, but there are some changes that you can make. So I'm going to hit the sensitivity button once.
Auto no, X.
Now what this is, if let's say you're driving across a state, you're doing long distance traveling. X-band is pretty much in 3 states, and they're not being as used. I think the state that you're going to see X-band the most still actively used is in Ohio. I've seen X-band on the lower part of Ohio going through Athens. The Highway Patrol uses X-band. So if you're in Ohio, I would certainly recommend that you leave X-band on. The same with New Jersey. Even though the state police are transitioning away from X, which has been like 25 years that they've had it. I mean, it's really been a long time. That's been their primary radar. They're moving to KA 34/7, but you'll see X-band still around, and even in some of the small towns. In South Carolina, and I think they're also transitioning away from the MPH K55, which was the X-band unit that was the go-to unit. So if you're in an area other than that area and you're going out of state, then you can pretty much turn X-band off. Again, there are pockets where you'll see X-band. One other thing, I mean, I've seen it in Mississippi. Some of the smaller towns and some of the lower income, or not as much of a tax revenue in those little municipalities, could potentially get an X-band gun or have them for a long time, or get hand-me-downs. So again, know your area before you turn it off. But for the most part, it's safe to turn off, other than those examples that I gave you. Okay, we'll press sensitivity again, cycle through it. Now, auto Lokay is an interesting feature. This is, again, for around town if you are being pummeled by K-band door openers and things like that. Now, with a GPS, you can counter that by auto locking out the features, or manually locking out with the feature using the push button on the smart cord. You can tap it, it'll mute it, and if you double tap it, it'll ask you if you want to lock out the location. And we can take you through what that looks like as well. So you can combat, if you're in an area where you generally see that, you can combat that and make the detector quiet by using that method, as opposed to relying on auto Lokay. But it is there, and it can be a global thing while you're driving in that mode, so you don't have to lock them out at all. Especially if you're passing through town, there's really no point to lock something out. Generally, I don't use lockout features in the auto mode or the manual mode. I just prefer to know that the detector's working, and especially if I'm driving in an area that I generally know. I like to know that the detector's working, and if you auto mute on the off chance that there's something wrong with the detector, very unlikely. I just like to be reminded that the detector is working and up to spec, because you get used to, like, if you pick up a speed sign or a door opener on the highway, you only get 1 or 2 of them over a certain amount of drive where you drive often, then it's doing its job. So, again, it's a personal preference. A lot of people like auto muting. In fact, the biggest complaint with radar detector users is, you can't win. Either it alerts too much and they're bothered by it, or, they pass something, a cop, for example, who's not even using radar. It's often the case. And they say, well, they call in, why didn't my detector go off? A radar detector is not a cop detector. And just because you see a police officer doesn't mean, 1, that he has a radar gun, or 2, he's actually using one at the time that you see him. So anyway, that's the sensitivity mode. And that's the sensitivity mode with auto Lokay. We're going to hit the sensitivity button again, highway. Center button on the top, and we're to highway. If you're going to be on the highway, again, doing long distance traveling, again, you can safely use it in auto mode, because the speeds you'll be traveling, you'll effectively be at highway. But historically, we used highway mode before these advanced digital signal processing detectors came out. So, think of these individual settings as a manual transmission in a car, and the auto mode as a high-end automatic, like a dual clutch system. The detector, really, you can keep it simple and really not put yourself at risk at all by using auto mode. Okay, the 2 top buttons here are pretty self-explanatory. The plus is increasing the volume. You see that? and the minus is reducing it. It's very quiet. Wow. Now, as loud as it sounds here, if you're driving like with this convertible top down, or you're cranking the music, you need every bit of audio that you can get. So that's what the pluses and minuses are. The mark location, MRK, is the mark location. You can mark the location.
Mark this location.
By pressing and holding briefly.
Speed trap. Other.
Look at this.
Red light camera.
You can use the
Speed
plus
camera.
and minus.
Speed trap. Speed camera. Red light
So
camera.
you can mark the kind of location that you're seeing. So let's listen to the cycles here. So you press the mark.
Mark this loop. Speed trap.
Okay. To mark the location, you press
Mark this location.
and release. Press again.
Speed trap.
And then you cycle if you want.
Other.
Other.
Red light camera.
Red light camera.
Speed camera.
Speed camera if you know they're fixed.
Speed trap.
A speed trap could be like VASCAR if you're in Pennsylvania,
Red light
where there is no
camera.
radar
Speed
use,
camera.
or they use NRAD, something like that. You can mark that is a general speed trap area, and that's important to have when you're driving, and especially like Pennsylvania. VASCAR is used heavily because the local police, other than the state police, the local police cannot use radar or laser. Now that's actually changing, because Pennsylvania has, after all the years of they've been trying to get some legislation through. There has been some legislation, so you're going to even see laser now in Pennsylvania. So some of those laws are changing. But if you're in Pennsylvania or other areas, VASCAR is done by local municipalities. A lot of times you'll see the white lines going across the street, and you'll see them. And oftentimes you want to look to the left or right, but marking that as a speed trap. Another way to do it is if you go into a town. There's certainly some towns when you go through, like Route 1, for example, coming into Harrington in Delaware. Boy, it drops, the speed limits drop from 55 or more down to 35 pretty quickly. And it's not uncommon to see those guys wait for you. Now, a lot of times they'll be using radar, and a lot of times they'll also be using in a constant on. So your detector is going to be alerting to that anyway. But, you know, if you're in an area that you know, or a road, a section of a road, you can mark it that way as well. So that's pretty cool. You can, you know, identify the type of locations. You're going to be able to do that with the iRadar app as well, which we're going to show you shortly. So we have the bright setting. Let's get to that. Very simple. We are on the standard high.
Full dark.
Then we go to full dark, and I'll show you how that works.
Dimmer.
Dimmer setting.
Dim.
Dim, which is a little brighter.
Bright.
Bright.
Auto.
Auto is that the detector will automatically adjust its brightness to the current lighting condition. So again, very simple to do, and leave it in the auto mode and let the detector do the work. But you have the option to do that right there. They give you the option. So really, for the new user to a radar detector, even though this is a high-end detector, you can pretty much leave it in auto mode, and you know you're going to be good to go. The detector is going to be giving the level of protection that we come to expect from a high-end radar detector. So what other buttons are on here? Okay, the mute button. If you're getting an alert, it won't now do it, but you can either hit the power cord, the smart cord, which has a little push button. You can press that, or you can reach over and just mute it. And the reason you'd want to mute it is if you're going to be in an area, let's just say you're traveling on the highway, and you have the unfortunate case where you come up behind a trooper who is, you know, not really going fast, or he's going at the speed limit, and he's running radar either instant on, or going the other direction, or has his unit left on, which is often the case, and you'd be pummeled with the alert for an extended period of time. Who needs that? You know he's there, and you know, until he gets off. So you can hit the mute button, and for the duration of the encounter, the detector is going to be quiet. It'll still display on the screen, but you're not going to be punished by the alert. So that's pretty much it. We've taken you through the plus and minuses, the mark, how to specifically identify the kind of location or event you're marking, the plus and minus for the volume, and the sensitivity, which is easy to change and then of course the power cable. The only other unique characteristic to this detector, and you're going to find this out using two buttons here, which is the bright and the sensitivity. And you can tell there's something going on there because there's a little thing here that indicates programming mode, PGM. And if you press
Menu.
and then we're in the menu, and again we're going
User
to
mode. Advanced.
we're going to take you through what that means in a separate tutorial. So that is
Completed.
that's the basic functionality of this detector. And for the users who are new to a detector, this may be your first one, or new to the brand of Escort or / really Cobra. I don't want to necessarily I'm conflating the brands a little bit because it was derived from an Escort brand, but hopefully this will be sufficient. There's a little programming or user guide that comes, which will also take you through, what some of these things mean and even how to program and what that means. But the video tutorial hopefully will be very helpful in you understanding how to configure and get this detector in the configuration that gives you the maximum comfort in driving with it and protection. So thanks for watching. If you like the video, please give us a thumbs up. As always, subscribe. We're going to have more videos coming, and we'd really appreciate if you're making a detector purchase or looking and researching that you come and give Radar Busters a chance. We are really a fully dedicated countermeasure company. That's pretty much all we do. You'll be very happy with your purchase. If you have any pre-questions, pre-purchase questions, so to speak, or pre-sales questions, give us a call, 888-227-8927. If you're lucky, you'll talk to Mike. He'll certainly guide you through all of the questions that you may have, so you definitely get the right purchase, even if it's not this detector. There's plenty of others. And if you have any post questions, technical support questions, how do I do this, or what does this mean, we'll be happy to field your question, particularly if you're a existing Radar Busters customer. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the other side very shortly.